Welcome back to LearnPianoLive.com. My name is Jamin, and as you can tell from the countdown clock, the lesson is about to get started. In case you're new with this, there's a few things I'd like to show you to help you throughout the lesson. Hey, good news. Today you don't have to listen to my voice for the entire lesson. We have a guest. So we're going to be focused on the questions that you submitted in advance. But if you want to drop some live questions in on us, we'll do our best to get to all of those and still be respectful of our guest's time. So you can still download the PDF and the MP3, but there's no specific assignment that goes just with this lesson because the goal is just to get some inspiration or get some advice, get some little nugget of wisdom that's going to help propel you one step farther down this journey, or maybe just to be entertaining. But whatever it is, I'm sure you'll enjoy it. These lessons are always guided and shaped by your questions, and if you're live with us today, there's a couple different ways you can do that. One is in the public live chat, and the other is the Ask Jamin a Question button, where you can ask me a question privately, and I won't share your identity in case you're afraid that your question is stupid. But it's not. If you're in the archives, though, then just open up the survey. At the end of that, there's a place where you can ask your question. I will say I frequently get questions from students in the archives watching a lesson from 6 months ago, and I have no idea what they're talking about. So please try to be as specific as possible. If you're watching this at LearnPianoLive.com, there should be a PDF and an MP3 button right next to this video. The PDF will often have additional video links inside so you can get more in-depth instruction on each of the topics. And if you're the kind of person who likes to print out the PDF so you can make the same notes on your physical version as I'm making during the lesson, now would be the time to do that. The MP3 is just a play-along track so you can practice more after the lesson. If these live lessons start feeling random or meandering, it's because they are, on purpose. So if you're the kind of person who wants classical training with a step-by-step method, then you're going to want to check out Kloppel Academy on the website. It's included in your live lesson subscription, so you can do both or either. And the upper levels are seriously hard work, but it's going to take you all the way from ground zero all the way up to being ready to enter any major music college as a piano major in classical or jazz. And thankfully, I think that's about all we need to cover before the lesson. So if you'd stick around afterwards and fill out the survey, I would love your feedback. But for now, let's have some fun and make some music. Welcome back to LearnPianoLive.com. I'm Jamin, and today we have the privilege of getting the insight from Eric Chun, percussionist, producer, and the list is going to get a lot longer and take up the whole time if I try to list off all the things. He's a professor, and our paths should have crossed a lot more than they have so far. But every interaction I've had with you has been enlightening, and I always get the sense that I'm just kind of learning one segment of your grand experience. So,
tip of the iceberg.
Right, exactly. So could you start off by just kind of walking me and everybody through some of the major experiences that you've had and kind of where you've picked up things that you've learned?
Well, I'm originally from Auburn, and I grew up there, one of the few Asian American families that moved up there. My parents were doctors originally at DeWitt State Hospital, and then they formed their own practice. Of course, when I came along, I started my music when I was 4, and being in a town in the early 60s up there, it was a small town. There was one music store that started me off on piccolo when I was 4, and I actually have it here today.
Cool.
And then
what was the name of the store?
Muchler's Music.
Muchler's? Wow, cool.
He actually ended up being a very well-known piano tuner later on after the music store closed. What a lot of people went through that store up in that region. Then I started piano when I was 5. I started percussion when I was in 3rd grade at Lincoln Way School, which is now the police station in Auburn. And then I went all the way through high school. Then when I got transferred, Placer High School went through a tax override failure. So my parents shipped me down to Jesuit High School. I'd drive down there every day. That was not good for me.
How long of a trip is that?
It was anywhere from 40 minutes up to an hour and a half at that time.
Yikes.
I was a high school kid trying to drive down there every day. Of course, they had no music program. So the formal music was out for me for 2 years, but I was taking private lessons anyway.
Right.
But I didn't have jazz band or band, but I started my career when I was 14 anyway, playing in a Herb Albert type of group, and we played all over the state. I was booked 50 weeks a year.
Wow. Okay, playing percussion.
Pianist.
Playing piano. Okay.
Yeah. So I really didn't get into more percussion till I got into college. So it was mainly flute and piano, but I started doing plays and singing, and I started improvising when I was 10 and started writing then. So I already had songs down, and I discovered I could sit down at the piano and play chords and not know what I was playing, but they were chords.
Right, sure.
And I go, why did I do this? How come I don't have any music in front of me?
Right.
So that was the start of combining improvisation with formal classical reading, both in flute, piccolo, and piano. And then I continued with the percussion and drum stuff on the side. Then in college, it really started to come together, but I was still a weirdo, and people couldn't figure me out because they see me here, then they see me there, and they go, wait a minute, what are you doing?
Right.
And even my college professors didn't understand me. There was only 2 people that did out of the whole faculty at Cal Lutheran, which is where I ended up transferring to. But I went to AR and took my first year theory when I was a senior in high school.
Real quick, let me back you up a second. So you said there was 2 people that you can think of that really got you. How did you know that they got you? What was that relationship like? Or? At
CLC, at Cal Lutheran, where I went to in college, one was Vera Dalen, who she was professional percussionist for Roger Williams, Hal Leonard, Florence Henderson, Gordon McBray, you name it. She was Claire Musser's star student who made Musser marimbas, and she was phenomenal. And the other faculty was Dr. Elmer Ramsey, who was a studio trumpet player. He got a lot of the classical calls for studio calls for when they did symphonic scoring at CBS and a lot. But they taught it at Cal Lutheran, and that's where I came. And they were my only 2 believers. Everybody else didn't believe in me at all.
So what was different about them? Like what? Can you any specifics about?
When I was a senior, I wanted to rent a Steinway because they had some pretty beat up Mason and Hamlins. They wouldn't let me rent the Steinway. So I said, you can't let me rent. I'm paying for that.
Right.
You can't tell me I can't rent that when I'm paying for it. I rented it, and then the head of the music department literally told me one day, you'll never make it. You'll never do anything. Try something else. You're not good enough, and you're just lucky to have a scholarship, but I don't think you're going to go anywhere.
Wow. That's like right out of a bad movie.
It's like Dr. Gilman or somebody saying like that to somebody at AR.
Right.
Said, why are you in this program? You shouldn't even be here. You're terrible.
Okay.
Yeah, that wasn't very good.
No, but...
For a 21-year-old kid that was multiple talented.
Yeah.
And I had to learn to believe in myself right there.
Was that do you feel like that's a quality you already had? Like that you're the kind of person who was going to be motivated by that, or? I was motivated by that, but I mean, if we're playing an art, we're playing music, you're pretty sensitive. Sure. Yeah.
I mean, you're just that type of a person. That's the way the art is. You have to be sensitive to the art. So you're also sensitive if you don't have thick skin to other people who don't believe in you.
Right.
And certainly that was one of the first issues of somebody who said that to me, and this guy was the head of the music department.
Wow. Yeah.
So Ramsey and Vera they kind of had to fight for me.
Wow. Okay.
But then I've gone a lot farther than most of them.
Sure. Well, I interrupted you with the questions about the teachers.
Yeah.
So then after that, what was your next musical influence or experience?
Well, if I backtracked a little bit, there was 2 influences here in this area. One was Henry Van de Graaff, which he taught me flute and piano during my elementary and junior high. And then in high school, I went to Mildred Butler, who was one of the big classical teachers in Roseville. She had 2 9-foot Steinways in her living room, and she cracked the whip with a birch stick. So if you didn't practice, whack. It's
right.
Like, dang, what'd you do that for?
Yeah.
You didn't practice.
I've known teachers like that. Yeah.
So she was very traditionalist, but she taught me a lot of discipline, and I went through a lot of literature with her. And of course, you're a kid in high school, and one of the last things you want to do is really go take piano lessons, and you could be playing tennis or football,
sure,
something else, and goofing around. And you're sitting in there in a living room waiting your turn while somebody's getting tortured out there in a lesson, and then she goes, "You're next."
But you survived.
They were big influences on me. At the same time, I was also involved in sports and community. I was doing both ski racing, tennis, competitive tennis, and competitive swimming. So between music and sports, that became kind of my stranglehold of keeping myself alive.
Right.
There, I almost turned out to be I almost was going to declare PE major when I went back down to LA because I was getting tired of the music stuff.
The people or the music?
I think I got tired of the people.
Yeah.
And I always lived with athletes, so I was used to this sports.
Right.
There was one guy a long time ago that went to UCLA, Jeff Borowiak. He was a professional tennis player at UCLA, but he was a clarinet player too.
Okay.
So he was kind of an inspiration for me because I go, oh, well, this is the guy can do both.
Yeah.
And he's really good at both of them. So
right.
Why can't I do the same thing?
Yeah.
So that's kind of, I continued on that, and that's how I started to branch out. It's been a tough road from 20 years in LA all the way up here, and that's how I learned about the industry.
Well, tell me about that. Where'd you get your experience producing, and what were some of the lessons you learned along the way? We need to get into some of the production stuff. Yeah, because you got so much wisdom on that.
Well,
topic.
I was doing all the music craft stuff too, but it was natural being in LA, being around the recording studios and record labels, and eventually I was meeting top people all the time, whether they're actors or producers or studio musicians or songwriters or composers, I was meeting them, and I was in a good spot in Thousand Oaks, where I met a lot of people that actually taught at a store called Driscoll's Music, but they were also producers and writers. And in the early days, Moore Park College had a 4-track studio. Cal Lutheran didn't have anything.
Sure.
Of course, this was before cassette 4-track recording. Everything was in reel to reel,
right.
1-inch or 2-inch. Forget 2-inch; you couldn't get into those studios. There was some studios that had 1-inch recording, and so I first learned about recording buying 2 cassette decks. And it's called Sound on Sound, and I bought a Yamaha board, and then my friend Danny Vicari, who he did the Oscar, he mixes the Oscars. And he did live with Al Di Meola, Chick Corea, Gary Wright, Carlos Santana. You name it. He was, and he had an ear like NORAD. He could, and his other friend, Ross Vanilli, who was Gino Vanilli's brother, who wrote I Just Want to Stop. Ross and Gino lived in Thousand Oaks. And another guy, Richard Baker, who played in Santana's group, lived in Thousand Oaks too. And then another percussionist that I know, Greg Bissonette. He worked at Driscoll's too. So we all taught at Driscoll's at this one store.
Okay.
So that's how we kind of met each other. And then I got into meeting Danny more. And then I went into Moore Park College, and I was able to record on 4-tracks, and I started to learn to production. There was no classes then.
Sure.
There was nothing. You either learned it from somebody that knew what they were doing, or you didn't learn it at all.
Right.
So I figured, well, I should know about the audio side, because if things get independent or I want to go into a studio to produce my own stuff,
right,
then I have to know where I'm going to go to. And I want to know when I walk into that room is that this or is that the reverb unit?
Right.
You didn't want to feel like you were asking stupid questions. And some of the engineer goes, I don't know, that's a reverb. Yeah. Okay, don't bother me.
Right.
And that happened a lot. And of course, if you got into the really big studios, if you got into A&M or Capitol or Sunset Sound or Ocean Ways or Larrabee or, there was a Smoke Tree Ranch. There was probably a Village Recorders. There's probably about 12 of the big studios. And then that was aside from the scoring studios, which is United Audio, Warner Stage, and over at the old Fox stage. So were some of the bigger ones.
So you picked up a lot of experience in all of that.
So I was learning
everywhere.
both sides of the fence and learning the business at the same time. At the same time, I also wanted to go, well, if I can't make it into music, maybe I should go into acting too, because I was already doing plays. So I went into acting too. Okay. And I said, well, in a year, I want to have a franchise agent, and I want to have my SAG card. And that happened.
Okay.
So I figured if the music was slow, I could do the acting.
Okay.
If the acting was slow, I could do the music. If both of them are slow, I could probably teach swimming or teach tennis or skiing or something.
Right. Yeah, okay. So you're just doing everything.
That was a multi-diversifiable thing right there.
Yeah, right.
That kept me in L.A., though.
Meaning kept you being able
I was
to be
able
in
to
LA.
live down there. Otherwise, I would have run out of money.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, well, and that's a huge thing for students. I mean, I don't have nearly the diverse background that you do, but I get students all the time who are wanting to, focus on one area in music, and they want to all perform, or they want to be a concert musician or whatever. It's like you gotta diversify what you're doing, and just kind of you just got to be in the industry so you're able to pay the bills, because there's not the chances that one focused thing is going to continue to pay off throughout time is really
You'll
a lottery
always
ticket.
continue to do that.
What's that? You continue to
do your one thing that you really like, but if you're good at all these other things, then they all tie in together eventually.
Right, because that one thing's probably not going to pay off. If your goal is be a YouTube star, like you probably need a couple other lines in the water too if you're going to catch anything.
But I did do an incessant amount of practice. I mean, I was crazy. I would practice 20 hours a day. 7 days a week, no days off. But to get up to that certain level, because I knew I was doing so many things, I was probably going to be a late bloomer. And that's true, because it takes time to get all these different parts of your craft together, and it's just not going to come overnight. So you really have to be dedicated and passionate about that craft, and then branch it out to see how the business is going to happen around that. And and try and meet the right people. Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that. Get some of the specifics. I'll ask a couple different questions, then you just kind of answer whatever sticks out. But who are the right people? What kinds of people do you need to know? And for a person who is hoping to break into the industry, become a performer, recorder, what are some of the key elements that they need to know?
Certainly, I can give it to you right down the bottom of the line. You should always know that if you come up from the artistic side and you want to push that, the art is the first thing that you want to protect and continue to surround yourself with. So you want to first surround yourself with other creative people that you can believe in, and people that have the same vision that you do, and will give you the allowance to create the way you want to create. But at the same time, you can't be so closed-minded. You want to listen to those and those other influences. And then
meaning if you're a songwriter, to be around other songwriters?
Absolutely. Right. But at the same time, you don't push just your songwriting. You have to listen to how they're doing it too, so you can combine. In the world of songwriting, the biggest thing for a single songwriter is to know in LA is how to collaborate. How to do song collaboration, because that's where the business is. You may not necessarily write the whole song and get the whole credit for it, but you need to write with other people to finish the song or to take it up to the next level before you do business with it. So once you find the creative people, then the next networking is to find people that would believe in your talent, that would want to do business with it.
Okay.
And whether it's a talent agent, personal manager, record executive, publisher, concert promoter, club owner.
Yeah.
I mean, there's hundreds of people that work in the industry that take that art and are able to do something with it. And you have to be open and understand where they're thinking and where their reasoning comes from. A lot of these people, you can have conversations and strike up networkings. With others, you'll kind of meet and they'll send you a contract and you really won't even know who they are. But if possible, my understanding and my experience is always to meet people face to face.
Okay.
If you start it with online social media, fine. But sooner or later, you should go to LA and really meet that person at an industry event and really talk turkey with them. But that's where the deals are going to happen, because that's where the highest belief can be held, when you see eye to eye, and that person can really, because they'll feel you out fast.
Right.
They'll really know where you're coming from.
So then, of the hundreds of people that you could interact with, who would be the ones to start
Key
with?
players.
Yeah, like, do you first need to talk to a manager, or do you first need to talk to a producer?
That's the egg before the chicken thing. And 20 years ago, it might be one person does this, another person does that. Now, today, one person does a whole bunch of things.
Right.
So you could meet somebody from an independent record label, but they do this, this, and this, and that might be the person that could help move you this way rather than that way.
Right.
But you kind of have, as the artist, you want to have a vision of where that tale is going to end up with your story.
Okay.
So it might not be a road that you thought about, but it might be the road that you're supposed to be on.
Right.
So in my key issues that I tell my students, everything today is in research. So because you can find information, everything online, just about, except meeting the person face to face.
Right.
So you want to find out as much as you can about where that person has been, what they do, where they live, what their preferences are, where their talents are, what their passions are, and then contact them. If it's a traditional way and you're a performer, obviously you want to have, if it's a musician, you want to have a manager. If you're an actor, you want to need a booking agent.
Okay.
Those are kind of the first two. If you're a songwriter, musician, you might want to contact a record producer that has a studio.
Okay. Let me push back on a little bit of that, just to get your feedback. How much of that can some people do on their own? Like, do you have to have a booking manager? Do you have to have a manager? Do you have to, how much of that can you?
Yeah, that's exactly.
Can you produce your own albums? Can you master your own tracks?
In today, 2020, there's a million ways to do it by yourself, called obviously do-it-yourself or DIY artist. And which, if you wanted that freedom, fine. You've got the ability and facility to do that right now. But the question is, do you have the networking, do you have the leverage, and do you have the talent that you could package all that and said, screw everybody else, I'm just going to do it myself? If you don't have those three elements and a couple more, then you're only going to go so far.
Can you go over those again? Networking, talent, and I don't remember.
What as I said?
Just give whatever the key elements
the
are.
Networking, definitely.
Okay.
Who you know, the talent, yes, and then your vision.
Okay.
What you want.
Right.
And the worst thing, what everybody asks you, if they don't know you who are, the first thing that everybody always asks you is, what do you do? And if you say, oh, well, I don't know, man, I'm just kind of cruising, my band,
Right.
That tells them right away within 10 seconds that you don't know what you're doing yet. You're still developing that concept.
Right.
So you want to come focused. And if you meet people and it's part of the networking, you basically have about 30 seconds to 45 seconds to impress somebody if it's a first-time meeting.
Okay.
And some people are really short. Hey, it's nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. Oh, cool. Yeah. All right. I got to go.
Right.
Others, they'll take an interest and it'll go a little bit longer.
Yeah.
So it always helps to meet people also via references. So if somebody takes you around to introduce you to somebody, that's huge.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, everyone who sits in that chair who has any amount of experience keeps coming back to the same thing of meet people, be a nice person, act professional, which is somehow missing, even though that seems to be a key theme among everyone with the experiences.
You're playing the percentages, certainly, when you're meeting people, but if you've done the proper research, then you'll know what kind of questions and where they came from, so you can keep the conversation to go longer. The longer the conversation goes, the better opportunities you have for somebody to finally go, yeah, I got to go right now, but hey, this is really cool what you're doing. You know what? Here's my card. Why don't you give me a call and we'll meet again sometime at the office.
Yeah.
That's a good
Yeah.
Good meeting.
Yeah. So then talking about the people that need to be involved, so a hypothetical situation, someone is self-produced a couple tracks. They're working on being an Instagram, whatever you call those people, star or whatever, or they're trying to get a following. They play some local coffee shops and stuff. What's the next step? How do they know when they need to pay out some money for some more production or for a manager, or like how can you tell?
In my business classes to college, in a class called 110, there's a concept that I call the artist ladder. When we get to the artist section, I give a ladder based on percentages, and it shows you how you're progressing on the ladder of percentages and when you need this and when you do that. And if you've done this so far, where you are now. And the most important thing is that I teach in that section is for people to understand where they are on the ladder. And they can design their own ladder, but it's also a great management tool which tells a manager where you are in your career and are you worth my time for me to even work part-time with you. And if you're a full-time, you might need to be at this level. Judy Rose Management, big management company in LA years ago, told me, well, you're an artist we want to work at, and you're playing with all of our clients that we are, but you're not making $40,000 a year yet. So we can't manage you full-time until you get up to that.
Huh. Okay.
So that was straight from Hollywood right there. You got to be making some money because we can't get any from you if you don't have any.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. That's funny because my experience, which is not nearly as much as yours, is kind of on the flip side of that, where I see a lot of young artists being taken advantage of, or managers are trying to find someone to manage so they can feel official about being a manager. Right. And so young artists who are wanting to, pay out $500 a month plus 10% or plus 20%. And it's like, well, you don't need that yet. You shouldn't be paying out money if there's no money coming in. But that's everyone feels official when everyone is giving somebody else a title. It
always, in my opinion, if you want to go to Hollywood, it always helps to know what a personal manager does and what it's like. So it's really critical that an artist learn how to do self-management.
Okay.
So when it comes down to full-time or part-time management, they really understand 20%. What are you going to do for that?
Right.
I said, dude, this is why I'm here and why I'm making this much and why you're not making anything. Right. So if you have to separate the men from the boys, they're going to do it for you. But the more you understand that, the more you'll know the value of somebody like a personal manager, especially for the music people, since they could gloss over things so easily and all of a sudden, oh yeah, you're going to do that for me? Oh, okay, whatever.
Right.
That's a terrible attitude.
Yeah. Well, I've seen managers, though, using air quotes, who, that they'll sign somebody and be getting paid and
they're not doing anything right.
Well, or they're just getting more free gigs. Like you played, 5 free gigs last month, and this month I got you 10. But like, still, there's no money coming in. So like, even though they're calling all the coffee shops in the area, like that's still not. You're still not getting anything for your $500 except for a lot more work.
Does your manager really know anything about the industry at that point? No, or are they just your best friend that you just didn't want to do the work, so they did it for you?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So you're not going to go very far as an artist with that type of a person because they don't have the networking, they don't have the leverage, and they don't have the breadth of what to do as a bona fide music manager or an artist acting manager. It's just a whole different ballgame. Yeah. It's a very tough business. It's ruthless. Yeah. It's actually very ruthless. And the managers always on the set are always arguing, on behalf of the artist, and that's tough. The manager's tired at the end of the day, and if they has to be with the artist 12 hours a day, that's draining,
right?
Totally draining. Besides the artists having to do their thing, but the managers kind of got to bark a lot,
right? And so you're recommending that someone try to self-manage for a while so they
learn what that is, or take some classes now. These days you can find information all over the place.
Free everywhere.
Besides ARC, you could go any other place.
Yeah.
So it's not like you couldn't do it in 1976 when I graduated from college. You couldn't find anything unless somebody was willing to tell you what it was. And if they didn't want to tell you what it is, that's how they kept you out of the business.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So then tell me, that's the kind of the manager side of things. What about the actual production of the music? How much should a person try to do by themselves? Or
Boy, that's
is
a
that
really
kind of
great question, and I could take it from yesterday. A client came up and he had me play his song. He wanted to know how it sounded.
what that he had done by himself?
Yeah,
Okay.
and he did it on Fruity Loops up in the hills,
Which is
it's a
drum
software.
Yeah.
And he brought it in and he played it. And it was a hip hop song. The first thing I told him, I stopped and I said, "You're missing a whole bunch of low end. You can't do hip hop without
Sure.
some bump in the low end."
Right.
So I said, "This is what it should sound like." So I brought some EQ up on my console, and to try and give him a little bit. And I said, "I'm already playing your song through a 12-inch bag end infra sub. You should have that should be banging through there."
Right.
And it wasn't. So it wasn't pushing the feel enough. So that's an issue that he wasn't sure what he was doing with his mixes, and I don't know if he was referencing or not. And plus, he wasn't sure if his vocal was right either.
When you say referencing, you mean
referencing other artists' productions.
Okay.
So he knew how to compete with what's already out there. So when it comes to producing your own works, I mean, you can learn a lot by yourself, but it's also really, really good to give it to other people to give a listen to, and if possible, take it to other places so a different point of view can be added to that. As long as you've got the vision in your mind and you've got references, you should broaden your productions out in a totality so they're balanced. And if you're going to compete as an independent artist and put it on your own site, then you really want to have it what I would call compatible, or it should be, in record label land, we call it commercially satisfactory.
Okay. Which just means that it would fit in.
It would fit in with what's current, what's on the air, other competition around you.
Yeah. Yeah. So then you do your independent recording, you bookend it with two other songs that are, I forget what the term was,
commercially satisfactory.
Yeah, right. And then you could tell that your song, it doesn't match the songs on both ends of it. Where do you go to get that other opinion? Or because all your friends are going to lie to you and say it sounds great.
Industry people, definitely.
Okay.
It doesn't matter if they're attorneys or managers or agents. If they're familiar with the music and other clients, then right away they can tell you. But if you want to go to have your song reevaluated, the best resources to go to publishers and other songwriters that are familiar with the business. If you're an independent artist, you might want to go to different producers that have studios that make compatible product, and either pay them for the studio time to listen to what you have, or if they want to do some work, then you pay them to reshape it a little bit, whether it's called remixing or remastering or redubbing. That's kind of part of the process to balance everything out.
Yeah. And then what can a person who is mastering do for a song? Like what's the point of a masterer?
You definitely need both levels. So the mix brings all the multi-tracks together so they can be cohesified down to a stereo track, as if that's the format that they want delivered. So at that point, the producer's in charge of that. So, but it may not be finalized to its final stage before it's gone to replication or to digital distribution. So you need a mastering house to use overall mastering EQ, mastering limiters, mastering compression, mastering format, mastering leveling. I mean, there's all these different forms of mastering, checking phasing, checking stereo imaging, checking mono.
Should an average person who's listening to a mastered and an unmastered version of a song
be able to tell the difference? Yeah.
Okay. So if you can't tell the difference, something's wrong.
You should be able to tell the difference.
Okay.
Yeah. So this isn't quite mastered. You need to go back and redo that.
Yeah. Okay.
So some mixes can be very close to being mastered. So there's different levels of what a mastering house may want you to actually mix it at, so they know that they can do more work.
Right.
Some people do some of the mastering house's job in a mix because they're so good at it, where there's less to do in the mastering house. Well, if that's the case, fine. Today's mastering houses are mastering editing houses too, especially with the digital files, because you got to do the pitch correction, and then you got to do then they want this pasted over here, then this taken out over here, then this fades out over here, and or if the record label says take it to the mastering house, this mix one sounds good, but we want you to do a mastered radio version and fade it out at 2 minutes 40 seconds,
right?
Because the rest of the song's too long,
right?
Or they may say we want to do a separate master, but put the chorus first. Okay. So they may either the producer gets first opportunity to do that, or the mastering house may end up doing those kind of critical edits, which could upset the producer's creative work at that point.
Right. So we're talking about studio time to record, mixer, producer, master.
It's a laundry list. It's a laundry list.
Yeah, that's a lot of money. I'm seeing dollar signs here. That's a lot.
Depending upon how you created the process and what you ended up with,
right,
is what's going to cost you if you need to go further, to go backwards, to go forward. Mm-hmm. So if you're doing a business deal, you got to deal with what the record label wants, what the marketing wants, the other co-writers that are in the process. If bills haven't been paid in the studio yet, and you can't go any further till this one bill's paid up before you can go over here. I mean, you've got all these kind of floating challenges before something is, quote, finally delivered.
Right. But on like the track that you gave us for the MP3 download, that was all, you did all of that.
Yes, I lucked out. I did all that.
You were all the guys.
But it took me 6 months.
Right. Okay. Yes. To do the one song. I mean, it's a 7-minute song.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Right. Okay. But so 6 months.
6 months. Mm-hmm. Which, if you're going to do a whole album, it took you one song every 6 months, it would be like 4 years.
Right.
But some artists, if they have that latitude,
sure,
they'll go to that.
Yeah, no reason not to.
And they won't be satisfied until they do everything themselves and it's exactly the way they want it.
Right. But you had the knowledge and the equipment to do that. Someone who's just starting out and thinks that they want to learn how to do all that stuff and wants to start messing around, are there any cheap entry options, any software or tools, equipment that you would recommend people start on?
GarageBand.
Okay.
It's affordable. It's free. It's got built-in sounds.
Well, free if you own a Mac.
Yeah.
It's only a couple
$1,000.
It's
not going to cost you a whole lot for GarageBand, and it's a fairly low learning process.
Yeah. There's no Windows, right? It's just all Mac?
I think they make one for Windows too now.
I know what I'm doing after the interview. Okay.
So it's, in my opinion, I mean, there's a lot of choices out there, but for the price and for what you want to learn as an entry-level aspect, and if you're not taking recording classes, I think GarageBand is a great first entry tool with lots of options. Mm-hmm. And then if you already have a pretty good computer, then it would be easy for you to upgrade and add a better software or more that gave you more options as your skills moved up.
Right.
So there's a lot of really good DAW engineers and producers out here that never took recording classes at ARC, and they're really good at a certain type of software.
Right.
You know, whether or not they're good at organic recording is another question. But that's another technical question is, do you stick with organic recording like this scratch set here, or do you just use drum samples from Steven Slater or the gazillion drum libraries, and it doesn't even matter if you mic anything up?
Right. And just for people who missed the last several sentences of terms, so you're talking about whether you're recording live drums, someone actually playing a drum kit, or something that's pre-recorded and pieced together.
Or a piano sample.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
I mean, I don't need a Steinway, so I don't need to buy $90,000. I'll just take the library sample for $200 and just play it on that.
Right.
And if people are going to mix it in with other stuff, then who would know that it's a Steinway?
Right. Right.
And what do people listen to today, which is a big thing we talked about with my client yesterday. Mm-hmm. So you have to look at what's today's music market and what are people listening to it, how are they listening to it, where do they want to get it, and how long do they end up listening to music, and how do they listen to it? People don't sit down in the living room necessarily listen to music for 2 hours.
Right.
They're doing 20 things while they're listening to music.
Right. Well, in the medium too. Are you listening on your Bluetooth headset, or are you listening on a stereo? I had a kid today who brought me. He was working on Fruity Loops track. He's like, I don't know what's wrong with this track. The bass just doesn't drop the way that I want it to. I'm like, well, okay, let me hear it. And he's like, all right, cool. He pulled it up on his phone. I'm like, well, I'm not gonna be able to tell anything from what you're playing there. Like, give me the track.
Right.
Let me play it on some speakers. And it sounded decent. It sounded a lot better than what he was expecting. He's like, it's supposed to be right. Oh, it came in there because I was playing it on my speakers. It's like, well, yeah, you can't play it on a phone.
They expect that we can listen to everything on a little phone this big,
right,
and determine that it's commercially satisfactory to get a deal with Warner Brothers Records.
Right. Not gonna work.
Maybe a first listen,
right?
But if you want critical listening, no.
Right. Yeah. So what is Eric's entry, biggest bang for the buck setup starter pack look like? Assuming you got a computer. Then what kind of software? You said GarageBand, something you would start with. What
I/O,
an interface.
Your interface.
So what kind of interfaces do you like? What kind of do you not like? What do we avoid? What do we get?
Depending upon the software and what you match and what your goals are and what you also have as your back instruments, like a studio quality mic, a great pre, and the whole
let me
shot.
Just define a couple terms real quick. So a preamp is.
A preamp is what we put in between a microphone and, say, the console.
Okay, and the console is the mixer.
So the preamp actually becomes a fancy mixing input for you because the quality of the sound is relevant to the components in the preamp. So if you don't have a lot of front end on your board, the preamp's almost a must if you want to have your voice or whatever you're miking come up with a little higher quality. And that's another big issue of, what is today's quality. So besides the I/O interface, you would want a good mic, a good pre, a good environment, and a MIDI keyboard. Okay. That would be the first digital studio got to haves.
Yes, and we will define all of those terms in the show notes in case you're wondering what some of that stuff is. So basically something to play on, something to record that thing that you're playing on, and something that goes in between so that they two can communicate with each other.
Yeah, and then the controller is the perfect issue because all these softwares have virtual instruments there.
Right.
So you need to access those instruments.
Right. So it used to be that you had to get a keyboard that had good sounds on it.
And now you just MIDI it in there, right?
Right, yeah. Now you can just pick any junky keyboard and with great
$30
sounds.
Keyboard and plays, whoever samples.
Right. Are there any favorite brands or types of interfaces that are your favorites to work with that you recommend for, again, a starter pack?
A starter pack. Well, you're not going to go wrong with PreSonus interfaces or who distributes Allen and Heath, Focusrite.
Right.
Tascam, Alesis. Behringer. Soundcraft might make a 2-channel input. Allen and Heath has a combination. So those are just simple 2 or 1-channel interfaces. You could put a microphone in, and it's going to go right into the software, and it's going to work, and it's going to sound decent. And then you have a set of phones that are going to go through there, and then the interface will convert into whatever format you want, 1644 WAV file or interface, whatever that analog signal is being converted into, and then away you go with the tracks. Of course, you should have a decent set of headphones or monitors.
Yeah.
You don't have to have $4,000 monitors for a starter studio. You could get a set of PreSonus ones like Iris 3.5s for like $400 for a pair.
Yeah.
And a set of phones that might be $80 to $100, and then that's going to go a long ways for you.
Yeah. I'm surprised how much of a difference that makes when you finally make that switch.
10 years ago, 20 years ago was a whole lot of difference. These days, there's just so much on that entry level end that's affordable for somebody. Of course, you need to attach your talent to that too. The other thing
You can't
that
just spend the money.
the other thing that people go to you to take piano lessons for.
Right. Okay. Well, yeah. We'll like I said, we'll put links to all. I hope we'll talk afterwards and get some links to that stuff. There's a lot that we're not getting to, but real quick, let me just give you a couple quick fire questions.
Instruments or stuff like that,
Yeah.
or
Yes,
endorsements I have.
Yes. Well, yes. I want to get to all of that and let people know where to
Okay.
go to get to your stuff. Real quick, intro advice for beginning students, or things that you are telling your students frequently that you see coming up in your classroom.
Persevere.
Okay.
You got to keep at it. Belief.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to believe when the going's not good, and find the right people and the right situation that you believe. So another good issue is to create experiment, find out where your niche is, and if it takes you longer than what you think, well then welcome to art.
Yeah.
You're not going to be a great Leonardo da Vinci right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to just take you the time, but art has no time limits.
Yeah.
It's only ready when it's ready.
Yep. What about just moving on to the next thing, to be respectful of your time here? Anything you wish that teachers did differently or that frustrates you about the traditional? Okay.
Yeah, I believe today's teachers in whatever field should be a lot more open, because the world is changing so fast. And in the music world and film world, it changes like every day. So it's important for the teachers to not only look at the craft of music and how it's being learned and skilled at, but also what's around that craft. And my biggest peeve is if you go to Sac State or any college and you spend $50,000 and get your bachelor's and you have nowhere to go with it, when you get out, that college has not done a good enough service to help you pay off that debt, because you now owe $50,000, and you know what? You're not going to do music to pay that off.
Right.
That's just going to be, and that's, to me, that's a terrible sin at it, because a college should be giving a lot more than just learning classical music. They should be training students of where they're going to go when they get out in a very complicated world right now. This is not 1970 where you could just go be a junior high teacher or teach high school band. I mean, you're going to go out into a world where there's no guarantees for anything right now. You want to be prepared. And plus, if you got a financial goal behind that and you owe a lot of money to that college, your dream just got shattered.
Yeah.
It's going to take you a long time for you to pick up that dream, because you've got to pay the debt off. And how many students are in debt right now, unless the federal government decides, oh, you don't have to pay us back anymore, whatever.
Right.
I'll have China pay it for you.
Right. Well, and there was a very influential person in my life when I was in college and considering what path to take and stuff. And they're like, well, do you want to do this as a career? Do you want to do this as a career, or do you just want to play music? I'm like, well, yeah, I want to play music and be really good at it. I don't know what's in the future. They're like, well, then go play music. Like, that's an option. You don't have to have a degree to play music.
Right.
Like, you could just get good and just go get good and then
Right.
do something else that's going to pay the bills. Or like you're talking about, just experiment. Get your little starter pack, start plugging stuff in, and see what happens.
Todd Morgan's a perfect example of that in our area.
Todd Morgan?
Yeah.
I don't know Todd Morgan.
Wonderful pianist, young entrepreneur. He's now 29. He lives with his mom and dad, but he gets to do his thing, and he just kind of takes it every year and moves up the strata.
Cool.
And he's really good now.
That's awesome.
But he's done exactly what you said. He never went to formal school. Doesn't mean that a degree is not going to do you any good, because it will further down the line when you want to make some shifts.
Sure, yeah.
But he's doing what he wants to do right now, and he doesn't need a school debt to be able to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and there's nothing in your degree, in your piece of paper, that guarantees you're going to be a good player or hireable.
No.
It's
Nope.
And if you are a good player, if you are hireable, if you're a good person, you got a good network, and you can play, like the piece of paper doesn't matter in a lot of cases.
That's right.
So
That's right.
yeah. Well, like I said, we've got a lot more here, and I'm sure we've got more questions in the chat and stuff. Hopefully, I can hit you up in a couple days with some of the follow-up questions from people who are watching the archives and stuff. But I want to be respectful of your time. I really appreciate it. It's always a pleasure. Always interesting to talk to you.
Well, thanks for having me on here. It's been great. You have a great setup here. It's great for your students to hear other sources and other people with different experiences, and
yeah,
we're just kind of part of the system here.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. And if you're watching in the archives, then make sure you send your questions along. We will get to all of those. I'll either try to answer them myself, pass them along to Eric, and appreciate you watching. Until next time, good luck. Have fun.
Thanks.